What's up, everybody? I'm Untitled Chapter, and today we are reviewing Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3.
Someday, I'm gonna make great machines that fly. And me and my friends are gonna go flying together into the forever and beautiful sky. Lila, and Teefs, and Flora, and me. Rocket.
Rocket. It really is good to have friends.
This video is going to be a couple days late because I really needed to think this over and talk about it with some friends for a couple days before I put out my review. I saw it Thursday, and I overall really enjoyed this movie. I think that there are some elements of it that I really dislike, which is what kind of holds this movie back for me. I personally, and I know I'm in the minority with this, but I think Volume 1 and 2 as a whole are better. But I think that Volume 3, the emotional moments hit harder than anything we've seen since we watched Star-Lord's mom die in the first movie. This is easily the heaviest of the Guardians films, like emotionally from front to back, it is the heaviest. It's very, very dark. It's very brutal. Um, and before I get too far into this, I should make sure that people know this is not a movie for you to take your 8-year-old to, which I know that might be confusing because all the kids are being marketed all this Groot stuff and Rocket Raccoon stuff. Your kid's probably very excited for this movie to come out. But if the wrong kid sees this movie, there is some very traumatizing stuff in it. And if your kid is not emotionally mature enough to handle that, they will be devastated. There is some very, very, very tragic and graphic stuff that happens in this movie, and that will really mess up the wrong kid. So if you're a parent and you're looking to take your kid to this movie, maybe you should find a way to see it before your kid does so you can decide for yourself whether it's safe for your kid to watch. Because really young kids might be very upset by this movie. So now that we got that out of the way, let's get into all the things I do and don't like about the movie. I'm going to start this off by avoiding all spoilers. And then towards the end of the video, I will put up a spoiler warning on the screen and I'll let you guys know when I'm going to talk about spoilers. So if you haven't seen the movie, it's okay to listen to this part of the video. I'll let you know when to click off and then you can come back after you see the movie if you want to hear my spoiler thoughts. This movie ultimately is the story of Rocket Raccoon and his current friends and his past friends. And the movie has a lot of flashbacks to Rocket's origin story, which is very, very sad and very brutal. And if you are somebody who is sensitive to animal cruelty, or like you're one of those people that, like, if a dog dies in a movie, you are like gonna burn the theater down, then maybe don't see this movie. The stuff that happens to Rocket and the other experiments in the past, in the flashbacks, are very, very messed up. And I think that you should be prepared for that going in. The one thing I really appreciated about this movie, which is going to make me sound really creepy, but they didn't shy away from how tragic Rocket's backstory is. And I think that that's great. I think that there's some critics that are saying that they felt that some of the animal cruelty stuff was a little over the top and that it was too much. But I honestly think that it needed to be that way because they want you to be in Rocket's shoes and they want you to hate the villain. The villain is probably the most hateable Marvel villain of all time. I think that other Marvel villains, usually they have a catch. Like, they're doing this for a reason that you can relate to. But the High Evolutionary was really, really messed up. He was an asshole, and not in a fun way. He is like the King Joffrey of Marvel movies. Like, you're gonna see this guy and want him to die the whole movie. Like, he is just a despicable, awful human being. And the movie reaches its darkest points showing you that. And honestly, I think that it needed to. I think that that was a good thing. I think the way that they laid out Rocket's backstory and set up, they kind of used that to set up the villain. Um, I think that that was all executed perfectly. I think that Rocket is the star of this film. And if they gave out Oscars for voice acting, Bradley Cooper would be my top pick for this year. Like, holy shit, he was good. There are parts where Rocket cries, there's parts where Rocket laughs, there's parts where Rocket talks trash like he always does. Um, and every single one of those moments feels completely authentic. And there was never a moment where I was like, this is just a dumb CGI creature. Like, he was completely believable the whole movie. And he's so good at delivering those lines. There's a part, without spoilers, that Rocket is crying like pretty hard. And it's like real, dude. Like everybody in the theater was like sobbing. Like, and I've seen people upload clips of this scene specifically on like TikTok and stuff, like in the theater, like theater reactions, and people are literally like you can hear them sobbing uncontrollably in the background of the person's video. So yeah, Bradley Cooper's performance was the best in the movie to me. I think that it's very, very hard to get a voice acting and motion capture performance to be that strong, and Bradley Cooper really nailed it. The second best performance in the movie to me is Star-Lord. I think that Chris Pratt absolutely crushed it in this movie. He has a couple emotional scenes, one of which is very intense, and he cries in the scene and everything. It's very good. His acting is extremely believable the whole movie. Any faults to his performance that I've found are ultimately on the writers, because there is a lot of dialogue in this movie that for me just didn't land. I felt like there was a couple jokes throughout the movie that they were definitely trying to force. Like, it's funny at first, but then the bit goes on for like 3 minutes, and you're like, can we please move on? There's more important stuff going on. And I don't know if everybody will feel that way. That's just a complaint for me. But there was quite a few scenes like that with Star Lord where he's talking trash about certain stuff or just kind of standing around being a jackass. And when you think about the overall plot of the movie, when you're in that moment, you're going to be like, why are you just standing around being an ass? Like, we have shit to do. Like, let's go. And and I know that the comedy's always been part of Guardians, but this movie is so dark and so heavy at times that when it comes back to the comedy, you're so emotionally drained that the jokes just aren't funny anymore. And you're like, I I I don't care about anything except seeing this villain die. Like, at least that's how I felt. There was quite a few comedic moments that were really, really funny and they worked really well, and the whole theater was laughing. But in my theater, I had a packed theater, probably 100 people, and everybody in the theater was laughing at the same moments that I laughed at, and it was dead silent for probably 80% of the jokes. And I don't think that that's necessarily the comedy's fault. I just think that this movie, the subject matter is so serious that when you get to those overly silly scenes, they just don't hit like they did in the previous movies, because you're being emotionally pulled down by the most depressing shit you've ever seen in a Guardians of the Galaxy movie. Ultimately, all of the acting was really good. Bradley Cooper and Chris Pratt were the two standouts for me. I think everybody gives a really good performance, though. Mantis is up there as well. There are some very, very good moments with Mantis in this movie, and I love the way that they've evolved her character as the Guardians content has kind of moved forward. I really loved her in the Christmas special. I think that she was like perfect in that. She was so funny. And that kind of carries into this one. She has kind of the same attitude she had in the Christmas special. And the way she plays off the other characters has really, really improved from Guardians 2. Like, she's so much funnier in this one, and her acting is so, so good. Batista gets a moment to flex his emotional muscles here. That he has a little moment where he gets choked up and cries a little bit, and it's very believable. It felt very natural. It was very good. So yeah, like I said, I think everybody did a great job in the movie. There's a couple specific actors that were big standouts for me, but nobody gave a bad performance in this movie. Even the side characters were fun. So yeah, that being said, let's move on to uh, the things that I didn't like about the movie. So I'm going to do all this without spoilers, and then we'll get into specifics with the spoiler section right after. So I'll let you guys know when that starts. I really did not like the balancing for this movie. Like I said a few minutes ago, I think that the extremely heavy tone of Rocket's backstory is almost too much. So when you switch back to what's going on in present day and the Guardians are arguing with each other about dumb stuff and they're just talking trash on people and everybody's making these really, really silly jokes, and there's some moments that are like normal MCU silly and it just feels out of place because you just watched this like devastating scene. So yeah, I think that the balancing on this one is easily the worst of the three in terms of tone. But that does not mean that it's a bad movie. So other than the balancing, I had mixed feelings on the soundtrack. The previous two movies, they used a lot of like classic rock and old R&B songs and things like that from like the 70s and the 80s. And this one kind of it continues the trend. Like there are a couple like really good like solid bangers on this soundtrack. But there's also a lot of songs that I honestly for the life of me could not remember. And if you played one of those songs, I probably couldn't tell you what scene it was in. And I don't really have that problem with the other movies. Like when I watched the other movies, for the first time, I remembered almost every song that was in the movie, and I could tell you if you turned on the soundtrack. Like, if you had the soundtrack on shuffle, I could be like, oh, that's from that scene. This movie, I felt, lacked that. It lacked that recognizability for the tracks. And all the songs, when they play in the scenes, they fit pretty well. I didn't have any moments where I was like, why are they playing that song here? Like, that doesn't fit at all. It was more so just that the songs are songs that I think a lot of people are unfamiliar with. I was unfamiliar with a couple of them, and I think that when you have a song you're not familiar with in a scene where a bunch of stuff's going on, you're focused more on the scene, and the song doesn't necessarily jump out as much. It makes the track forgettable. No disrespect to any of the musicians. If one of the songs on the soundtrack's from like your favorite band or whatever, that's perfectly fine. I'm not trashing the music. I'm just saying for the movie, the way that the soundtrack is laid out and displayed, there's a lot of songs here that I really just don't remember. And if you played them for me, I wouldn't know what scene they were in. Another problem I had was Adam Warlock. And this isn't really like a major problem. I've seen a lot of people say that they absolutely hate him. I definitely wasn't in that boat. I think that Will Poulter did a good job. I think the design for him overall is fine. I didn't really have a problem with his costume. But my issue with him is when he first shows up, he is like, you get that promise of like comic book Adam Warlock. Like when he shows up, he beats the shit out of everybody. Like he is terrifying. And then like the next scene that he's in is like funny and he's an idiot. And I did not like that at all. I think that it worked in some moments and didn't work in others, and I think that there were moments where it almost felt forced and you probably could have cut those scenes out. And it's like I said, it's nothing against Will Poulter. I think he was fantastic. And the moments where he really shines. Like I really liked him. But it's just because the writing kind of holds him back in certain places because they want him to be one of those comedic relief characters. And Adam Warlock just is not that kind of character. Like, this is a guy who is capable of fighting Thanos one on one with the Infinity Gauntlet. And so that makes it very weird to me when you see him in the movie and he's kind of a bumbling idiot in certain scenes. And it's very weird. The movie gives an explanation for why he acts that way. To me, it just felt like a cop out. Like they just needed an excuse to make him funny for this movie. I don't know if maybe in the future his character will act different if he shows up in something else, but I'm thinking that he'll act that way the whole time because this is going to be how people are used to him now. And most people that watch these movies are not really comic book fans. So they're not going to notice. They're going to think it's just that's the new guy Adam. They're not going to know anything about him. So I think for most people his character won't be a problem at all, but for the comic book fans, that's I think his performance will be very divisive and and honestly his performance was divisive for me. Like I can't tell you 100% whether I loved him or hated him. It's somewhere in the middle. Another thing I really disliked about this movie, and I hate to say it, but is Gamora. I think that this is a major problem that I had with Endgame as well. It's a big reason why I don't really like Thanos in Endgame, is because when they reset the timeline in Endgame with those characters specifically, like they pulled them out of the past, I think that erasing all of the character development that we've seen on screen sets the characters back to square one, and now you have to rush to wrap up the other story that's going on, and now you're held back by this other character. But when you set him back to how he was in Guardians of the Galaxy 1, it disrupts the emotional tension that you established in Infinity War. And that's the same problem that I have with Gamora here. Her character is like she was at the very beginning of Guardians 1, where she didn't like Peter, she didn't like any of the other Guardians, she doesn't trust them, she doesn't know them, she hates them, she talks trash on them, she doesn't respect them, she's very rude. And honestly, for most of the movie, and it's not Zoe Saldana's fault, because it's the writing's fault. She's doing her job, and she always does her job well. She's a great actress. But the character of Gamora ultimately throughout this movie is kind of an asshole. And that's it. That's like really all she's there for. She's just there to be an asshole to the Guardians and to other people. And you do get an ending for her character. Every character gets kind of their ending for the trilogy. And I I was really just torn on the direction that they took her in. I really thought that they were going to do like a 51st dates kind of thing where Peter was going to have to convince Gamora to fall back in love with him. And I don't think that the movie needed a love story because that would have been way overstuffed. But I don't know, just erasing her history with Peter and making her that kind of character, it kind of forced Gamora and Nebula to swap places. So now Gamora acts more like Nebula did in Guardians 1 and 2, and Nebula acts more like Gamora did in Guardians 1 and 2. So it's very strange. I didn't like that choice, but I don't think it's really James Gunn's fault either because it's a side effect of what they chose to do with those characters in Infinity War and Endgame, which he did not have full control over. Ultimately, I left this movie thinking that Gamora was pretty forgettable. She's kind of just there most of the movie. Another problem that I had is that Star-Lord's arsenal of gadgets is almost entirely missing, which was really weird to me because I've seen a lot of people saying that his helmet was destroyed in Guardians 2, that's why he doesn't have it here, but he has it in Infinity War and Endgame. There's a lot of like really cool, dramatic, slow motion walking shots of the team together. Um, and it was just a shame that they finally gave the Guardians that comic book suit, and we never get to see him with the helmet and the suit. So I almost feel like we were robbed of comic book Star-Lord. I was I was so excited when those set photos came out. This is more of like a nitpick, obviously. I don't think that him having or not having the helmet really affects the movie that much. I just think that it's very weird that the iconic mask of Star-Lord that was worn in the last two movies and Infinity War and Endgame is just not in the movie at all. And also a lot of his weapons aren't there. He really only uses his blasters in this movie, and I think at one point he uses like some taser charges that he throws and sticks to people, and that's about it. He never uses like his gravity well gadget or anything like that. He doesn't use any like rocket boots or jetpacks or anything like that. He's just like a guy with guns now. And I thought that That was kind of weird. But yeah, ultimately, his character is still really good in the movie, and his performance is great, and the action scenes we do get are really good. So it's not really that big of an issue. It's just very strange to see all of that stuff stripped from the character out of nowhere because he was very flashy in the last couple movies. That being said, I'm going to move on to the spoiler section. If you have not seen the movie, get out. This is your warning. Click off the video, come back later if you want to hear my thoughts on the spoilers. All right, so now we are in the spoiler section. Everything in the movie will be ruined if you do not leave. The first things first, I need to talk about the most devastating and memorable scene of this movie for me. And that is the scene where Rocket's friends die in his flashback. The scene is very, very dark. It's very traumatizing. I think that everyone's voice acting performances were great. I think that the High Evolutionary like crushed it in that scene. Like he is such an asshole and it's so believable that I'm like, yeah, I just want this guy to die now. This is like this scene makes you really hate the villain. Like this scene is done so well, and I think that the High Evolutionary, because of this scene, is probably going to be like the most hated Marvel villain of all time. He's just so evil. The mixture of all the sound mixing in this scene is it just adds to that element of like horror of what you're watching. Like having Floor constantly calling out like Rocket Tief's floor go now, Rocket Tief's floor go now, and Rocket like screaming and crying, and Tief's like Rocket please we have to go. Like it's all of that stuff happening at once while the High Evolutionary is still talking shit, and it's like it's so it's just so much. It's so devastating. And um like there were a lot of people in the theater like crying during that part, and I was really struggling not to cry, not gonna lie. It was just very dark and messed up, and for the comic book fans, knowing that Lila is Rocket's comic book love, that's it was very rough watching that scene. And the payoff for that scene later, holy shit, dude, when Rocket's laying on the table and he's dying, and they're putting the passcode in to save him, and it's like taking too long, and he's like going in and out of the afterlife. When he shows up in heaven and sees Lila and all his friends, and she's like, "You were right. The sky is beautiful and it is forever." And then he says, "Can I come?" And she's like, "Yes." And then his heart stops. I was so broken watching that scene. In that moment, we didn't know he was gonna be saved. Okay, so I was broken. Okay, I was very upset. And Star Lord's performance, perfect in that scene. I think that his like screaming was so on point with how the audience felt. Everybody I know saw the trailers for this movie and went, if Rocket dies, I'm gonna freak the fuck out. And technically, he died. He was, brought back, but he died. He did die. The scene of the other animals dying was just so rough. And I think that if you've seen the movie already, you know that this is the scene I was talking about earlier when I said not to take little kids to the movie if they're not ready. Because this scene, like for the wrong kid, if they're like 5, 6 years old, they're going to be fucked up after seeing that. Like it's not happy. This is not like the last two movies where it's like jokes the whole time and like big space colors. It's like literally like people being shot and murdered and tortured and like cut up, and this movie was just very heavy. I liked that we finally got to hear somebody say fuck in Marvel because I'm a degenerate and I say that shit all the time. So seeing that in superhero stuff is always great, especially because uh, with the Disney track record They tend to shy away from a lot of swear words. They always cut away at the last second and stuff like that. And it's funny, but after you do it 50 times, it's not funny anymore. I really thought that this scene specifically was refreshing, and I thought that it was very funny hearing Star-Lord say it. Those of you who are like diehard Chris Pratt fans that watched him on Parks and Recreation know that this guy is a master of improv. He has one of the funniest improvised scenes of all time about Kim Kardashian with Parks and Rec, and it made it into the blooper reel because it was too bad to go on TV. So if you guys want to see a hilarious Chris Pratt scene, just type in like Parks and Rec Kim Kardashian and then watch that blooper because it is hilarious. The biggest problem that I had with this movie was the amount of fake out deaths. And normally you get one or two of those in a movie and it's fine. But once you get like three or four, it's too long. Okay. And then it becomes like a gimmick that you're doing because you're clearly too afraid to kill the characters. So you just want to scare the audience for like a cheap emotional moment and then you move on from it. And that really annoys me. The whole movie's building up that Rocket might die. So you kind of guess that Rocket won't because obviously like you expect it, like if they killed Rocket, you would be devastated, but you knew it was coming. If they don't kill Rocket, then you're happy that he lived. But at the same time, during that journey to save Rocket, Drax gets shot twice. You think he's gonna die. He doesn't die. He's completely fine. And then the biggest one that bothered me um, was Star-Lord's, but they also did one for Adam Warlock where the ship crashes with him in it and then it self-destructs and then he blows up and you think he's dead and then like 5 minutes later he's fine. And that was my problem with this movie. Is it just felt like every single character had a fake death and it was like really kind of annoying. But the Star-Lord one really pissed me off because I thought for a second that they were really going to kill him because they hadn't killed anybody the whole movie and everybody kind of went into this expecting somebody to die. So I really was like, I swear to God, if they kill Star-Lord because he dropped his fucking MP3 player, I was going to be furious. Like I might have actually walked out of the theater if he really died there. Um because I think that's an extremely stupid decision to kill the main character of the previous two movies and the leader of the Guardians of the Galaxy because he dropped his fucking MP3 player. Like, having him go back for it and then jump there if he had made it would have been sick. It would have been like an Indiana Jones kind of moment where he drops his hat and reaches in and grabs it at the last second before the thing crushes him. That would have been great. But instead, they make you think that he's gonna die. And I was gonna be real fucking mad. And then, of course, one of the other people that definitely didn't die, Adam Warlock, shows up and saves Quill at the last second. Which is fine. I didn't have a problem with him saving Quill. My problem was that they did the fake out where they're like, oh, Quill's gonna die. But yeah, like I said, ultimately, the movie is very good. I think that the emotional moments hit extremely hard in this one, and that's the redeeming quality of this movie for me. If the Rocket storyline was not as good as it was, I would like this movie significantly less. I think that the payoff for all the characters ultimately in the end was pretty good, although I thought it was a little weird that after all the time Mantis and Drax spent becoming like really close, she kind of just is like, "No, I'm going off on my own. You stay here." Um, I think it would have been great to see those two end up together in some way, either just as best friends or as a couple or something like that, because they had such great chemistry. And Drax was really the only person who kind of understood Mantis in Guardians 2. So I thought that it would have been really great for them to wrap that up and have their story kind of be together. Mantis going off to understand like who she is and more about herself is very interesting, and I really do hope they do something with that because I think that Mantis is one of the best characters in these movies, and she has a very interesting power set that you could do a lot of really cool stuff with, like being able to jump and cling to all the walls and stuff like she did in the Christmas special, and being able to control people. At one point in the movie, she touches somebody and tells them that they're a kitty cat, and then he starts walking around like meowing, which was hysterical. Um, I could watch a whole movie of just that, of just her like on Earth messing with people, it would be hilarious. Just give me like a comedy Disney Plus series for her, and I would watch the shit out of that. Batista's ending had a lot more heart, in my opinion. I think that him kind of staying to help take care of all those kids that were being held captive. I think that that was really great. This movie, they kind of set him up really nicely at the end, and I think if Dave Bautista decides not to come back, I think that he's ended in a very rational and nice place. The only one I was really mixed about was Gamora's, because I really feel like her character, they just kind of put her somewhere because they didn't know where to put her, because like I said, her story was erased in Infinity War and Endgame. So I think that, you know, it's an unfortunate side effect that James Gunn had to deal with. I think he handled it pretty well, but I don't know. Overall, I think that her story is the least satisfying to me. I think that Nebula staying at nowhere and kind of taking care of that city and being kind of like the mayor of that city now is pretty cool. And I really liked Star-Lord going back to Earth and seeing his grandpa. I thought that was really nice. The When his grandpa gets up and hugs him and he just goes, "Hi, grandpa." I was like, it was just really touching for me, because I'm somebody who's always been like very close with my family members. So like, I don't know, it just it felt kind of nice to see that moment. I hope my review doesn't piss too many of you off, but it probably will, because I've been much more critical of this movie than I think most people will be. I think that this movie is a pretty solid 8 out of 10. I think there is a lot of absolutely phenomenal moments, like some of the best in the entire MCU. However, the comedy just didn't really land for me. There's a really long, drug out section in the second half that where they're in like the living base, like satellite, and they have to go there to get like a file, and then they don't really accomplish anything. They just find out that they can get the file from a different guy. Um, that whole sequence felt very shoehorned into the movie, and I honestly think you could have cut most of that out and the movie would have flown a lot better. Overall, Rocket and Star-Lord are massive saving graces for this movie. Their acting is very good. I think that Groot was cool. He had a lot of cool moments, things like that. The music, the songs that really stood out to me, really stood out to me. I loved hearing Creep when Rocket was listening to that at the beginning. It was a really good tone setter for the movie, because the other two start with upbeat, happy songs. This movie started with a sad, self hating song that Rocket's listening to. And I think that's very symbolic of how his arc has evolved throughout these movies. I think it's a very good ending to this trilogy. They left it pretty open, so a lot of these actors can choose to come back. I really hope that we get a dedicated, like, Star-Lord movie where he finds out he didn't need his dad to use his powers, he just needed to unlock them somehow. Because if you guys remember, Peter is half celestial. He required a celestial to to help him channel his power. Now he's on Earth where we know there's a celestial. So maybe they could do something with that, and then we'll have a Peter more like the Guardians of the Galaxy video game, where he has all the blasters and gadgets and mask and everything, but he also has some powers to go with it. So seeing those powers kind of come into play and seeing some of his celestial powers we saw a taste of in Guardians 2 would be really cool, and it'd be a really fun way to evolve his character more, if they do decide to continue with him in like a dedicated sense, like where he's going to be a main character of something. So yeah, those are my overall thoughts. Final score is an 8 out of 10. I think that the movie is overall very enjoyable. I will probably go see it again in theaters before it's out. I have my problems with it, but nothing that ruins the movie. So those are my thoughts. Comment down below what you guys thought. If you guys enjoyed the video, be sure to leave a like. Subscribe to the channel if you want to see more. I also do gaming content in case this is the first video you've ever found. So if you want to see me play any of the games, I'm currently playing Star Wars Jedi Survivor on the channel and Hogwarts Legacy. And I also play a lot of multiplayer games with my friends, so we get a lot of funny moments out of that. So if you guys are interested in that, be sure to go over to my channel and check it out. As always, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys later. But when we